She stood on that platform like she'd already decided nobody was coming for her. I remember thinking that before I even knew her name, before I knew any of it. 5 children. A trunk with the corners worn soft. A woman holding herself together with nothing but her own spine. And a folded piece of paper in her pocket that was about to tear my whole life open again. My name's Ezra Colton. I was 34 that September, ranching about 4 miles south of a rail town called Larkin's Ford, the kind of place that exists because 2 dry creeks meet there, and a surveyor once needed somewhere to put a water tower. I want to tell you what happened the day a stranger's grief walked into mine, because 4 years later, I still think about it most mornings before the sun's even up. The wind that day carried the smell of baked iron and wood smoke, the way it always did in that country come late summer. I'd ridden in from the south pasture with a strip of harness leather tucked under my arm, meaning to get it stitched before supper and be home before dark. I wasn't looking for anything. Understand that. I'd stopped looking for things a long while back. You get good at that after enough years of nobody looking back. Larkin's Ford wasn't much. 1 street. A mercantile with a green door that needed paint. A livery. A saloon that kept its shutters half closed even at noon, like it was ashamed of the daylight. A boarding house with a porch that sagged in the middle no matter how many times somebody shimmed it. And at the far end, past the last building, the platform, the last human-made thing before the planes just kept going for 200 miles like they didn't care what you thought about that. I saw her before I saw the children. She was standing dead straight next to a carpet bag and an old wooden trunk, wearing a brown wool dress with trail dust ground into the hem, and a hat that had clearly been brushed that very morning. Like appearances still mattered, even out here at the end of the line. Her chin was level. She was staring down the empty road out of town the way you stare at something you've already decided not to expect anything from. Then I counted the children, and something in my chest went quiet. 2 boys, the older one maybe 7, holding one handle of that trunk like it was a job somebody had trusted him with. A younger boy, maybe 4, gripping the other handle just as hard, even though I doubt he was doing much lifting. A girl of about 6 clutching a rag doll stitched out of an old flour sack. An infant asleep against the woman's shoulder, mouth hanging open the way babies sleep when they trust the person holding them completely. And behind her skirts, a small boy, maybe 3, fist twisted into the wool of her dress like he was afraid letting go would mean losing her. 5 children. I reined up without meaning to. Down at the platform, the station agent had come out with a paper in his hand. Talking to her low and careful, the voice a man uses when he's got to deliver news he wishes somebody else had drawn the short straw for. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she nodded once, took the paper from him, folded it, and tucked it into her dress pocket with the same small, final motion you'd use putting away something you can't look at again until you're alone. He touched his hat and went back inside. She just stood there with her children arranged around her like furniture in a room that didn't have any walls. I sat my horse a long minute. I could feel the sun on my neck and the leather warm under my arm. Down the street, the mercantile owner had stepped out onto her step to watch. This town didn't get many strangers, and it got even fewer strangers who looked like trouble was already sitting on their shoulders. I hadn't crossed a street for anybody in 4 years. My wife, Mara, had died the spring before that. The influenza came through the valley the 2nd year after the war ended, and it didn't care much who was strong and who wasn't. I buried her on the rise behind our house, under a cottonwood that turns the color of a struck match every October. We never had children. There'd been the house, the small herd, the work, and after a while only the work. For a long time, I kept 2 cups out on the counter every morning out of pure habit, like my hands hadn't gotten the news yet. Then one morning, I stopped setting the 2nd cup out on purpose. And after that, some months later, my hands stopped reaching for it without me even deciding to. I figured that was just going to be the shape of the rest of my life. A man, a ranch, 1 cup. I clicked my tongue and let my horse walk on. I didn't hurry. Hurrying draws the eye, and every eye on that street was already on her. The mercantile woman, 2 men lounging outside the livery, a boy who'd stopped sweeping the boardwalk to stare. I rode the length of the street like a man with ordinary business at the far end of it. And only when I reached the platform did I actually swing down and loop the reins over the rail. The older boy watched me climb the steps with the flat, unimpressed stare of a child who'd already learned to size men up fast, because his life had apparently required it. "Ma'am," I said. She turned, younger than I'd guessed from a distance, not young exactly, but younger than her posture had suggested. Late 20s maybe. Gray eyes, the skin around them pulled tight the way it gets on a person who hasn't slept soft in days. "The eastbound's already through," she said. Her voice didn't shake at all. "I know." I wasn't waiting on it. I took that in. I looked at the trunk, at the carpet bag. At all those children arranged around her like she was the one fixed point in a world that had stopped being reliable. "Somebody meeting you?" "Yes. And he didn't come?" "No." She said it without any bitterness in it at all, just reported it plain like weather. I nodded once and looked down that empty road with her, saw the heat shimmering off the wagon ruts, the country beyond that didn't care one way or the other about any of it. "It's a hot platform," I said. "It is. There's shade and water at the boarding house." She looked at me properly then, and I understood she'd been deciding something from the moment she'd heard my boots on the steps. "I haven't the money for the boarding house," she said, quiet just to me. "That isn't what I offered." I bent down and took one handle of the trunk. The older boy didn't let go. He held on with both hands, knuckles white against the wood, looking up at me with the face of a kid who'd been told to be a man far too early. "I've got the other end," he said. I didn't argue with him. I just lifted my side and waited on his feet before I moved. We carried that trunk down the platform steps together at his pace, not mine. The woman picked up the carpet bag with her free hand. The girl gathered up her doll. The 3-year-old kept his fist knotted in her skirts and walked when she walked, like they were one creature instead of two. 3 doors down sat the boarding house, and the widow who ran it. Everybody in town still called her the widow at the green shutters. Though her shutters had been painted blue for years now, came out onto the porch when she saw us coming, and held the door open without a word. Her name was Odette Fenwick, and she'd been a girl in this country before there was even a railroad through it. She'd watched enough arrivals in her life to know exactly which ones needed talking to, and which ones just needed a door held open, and their business left alone. If you've ever had a stranger's kindness show up at the exact moment you needed it and not 1 second before, you already know where this is headed, but stay with me. Because it gets a lot more complicated than a good deed on a hot platform. I set the trunk down inside the front room. The older boy let go and stepped back, rubbing his palms on his trouser legs, not looking at anybody. "Cold water in the pitcher," Odette told the mother. "Cups on the shelf. Little ones can sit on the rug, it's clean." "Thank you. Sit yourself down, too." The woman sat the way a person sits when their body's been standing longer than it can remember. The baby didn't stir. The girl arranged her doll carefully on the rug. The 3-year-old leaned into his mother's knee and shut his eyes. The older boy stood by the door like he hadn't decided yet whether they were staying or not. I put my hat back on. "I'll be at the livery a half hour," I told Odette. "If she wants me, send the boy." "All right." I didn't say anything to the mother before I left, and I didn't look at her either. Because I'd already understood that being looked at was one more thing she'd have to carry, and she was already carrying about as much as a person could hold. I walked to the livery and stood in the shade while a man I'd known 10 years shot a sorrel mare, and neither of us talked for a while. Finally, he said, without looking up from the hoof, "5 of them." "Yes, husband was supposed to meet her. I expect so, didn't—" The hammer struck a nail clean. "There's that empty house at your south line," he said. "Roof sound, needs a stovepipe." "I know." That was the whole conversation. He moved to the next hoof, and I stood there a while longer before walking back up the street. The older boy was sitting on the porch steps when I got there, elbows on his knees. He stood up before I'd even reached the bottom step. She said, "Come in." "All right." I followed him inside. Odette had laid out bread, butter, and cold ham on the front table, and the 3 smaller children were eating with the slow, careful movements of children who'd been hungry recently enough not to trust that the food was staying put. The baby slept in a basket on the floor. The mother sat with her hands folded in her lap, her plate untouched in front of her. She looked up when I came in. "Sit," she said. I sat across from her and set my hat on the bench. She didn't waste any time. She reached into her dress pocket and pulled out the folded paper the station agent had given her, laid it on the cloth between us, and turned it to face me. Then she pulled a second paper from the same pocket, older, the creases gone soft from handling, and set it down beside the first. "I've been waiting for you," she said. I didn't understand at first. I looked at her face, and her face gave me nothing, tired, level, closed. Then I looked down at the papers. The first was a telegram. I could read the shape of it without even unfolding it. 2 lines, a name I didn't recognize struck through in pencil, the word asterisk, deceased asterisk, a date in August. The second was a letter, addressed in a hand I didn't know to a man I'd never heard of in a town 3 counties east. But the return address written careful and small in the upper corner, that was my own address. My own house. I didn't touch either paper. I sat very still, staring at that handwriting, trying to place it. Then I placed it. Odette came in from the kitchen with the coffee pot, saw my face, and turned right back around without pouring a drop. "I need you to understand something about what happens next. Because it's the whole reason I'm telling you this story at all. I thought grief had already taken everything from me it was ever going to take. I was wrong, and I wasn't ready. Outside, the wind moved once through the cottonwoods and went still. I'd seen that handwriting before, 2 summers back, in a completely different room of my life. Mara used to keep a tin on our kitchen shelf where she'd put letters meant for neighbors when the postmaster's boy mixed up the mailboxes, which happened more than you'd think in a town that small. She used to address envelopes for a woman down the road who'd never learned her letters, sitting at our table with the lamp pulled close, tongue at the corner of her mouth. Careful as a child, copying her first alphabet. I'd watched her do it more times than I'd ever counted because I hadn't known I was counting. The tight little schoolhouse loops, the way she crossed her T's high and short. The way the last letter of my town's name curled back on itself like it was asking a question nobody had answered yet. I sat with my hands flat on my knees and didn't move them. Odette stayed in the kitchen, giving us the room, opening a drawer she didn't need open, setting something down that didn't need setting down. I was grateful for that in the same distant way a half-frozen man is grateful for a roof. He knows it matters, he just can't feel it yet. After a long while, I reached out and turned the letter so I could see the address again. That town, 3 counties east. I'd ridden through it once, years back, on a job that took me further than I'd meant to go. I remembered a low church and a creek that ran the wrong direction for that country. I didn't remember a single soul there. I had no reason to, but my wife had written this letter. My wife had sat at our kitchen table with the lamp pulled close and addressed an envelope to a man 3 counties east. Using our own address in the corner because that's where she lived, where we lived. And somewhere between her hand and his, that man had died and the letter had come back. Only it hadn't come back to me. It had come here. I lifted my eyes to the kitchen doorway. Odette was standing there with the coffee pot, staring at a knot in the floorboards like it had personally wronged her. "How long?" I asked. My voice came out steadier than I expected. 4 years, the woman across from me said. I nodded, though I couldn't have told you what I was nodding at. The number, maybe. The way a number spoken plain can settle something in your chest, even when nothing else can. She crossed the room, poured my coffee with a hand that didn't shake at all, set the pot on the trivet, and sat back down across from me with her hands folded. I didn't drink it. I watched the steam bend in the still air. "Tell me," I said. She gathered herself the way you'd pull a shawl around your shoulders that isn't actually there, and then she told me. Her husband, she said, had been a quiet man. Not unkind, not cruel, just a man who'd stopped speaking somewhere along the way and never quite started again. He'd come home from the war missing, something she'd never been able to put a name to. And they'd built a life around that missing piece the way you build a fence around a hole in the ground, so nobody falls in. The children came, the work came, the years went, and then 4 years back a letter had arrived. She hadn't opened it, it was addressed to him, and she'd never opened his mail, not even toward the end, when there was almost nothing left between them worth keeping locked. He'd read it right there at that same table, twice. Then he folded it, put it in his coat, and went out to the barn and didn't come back for a long while. When he finally did, he told her in the short, flat way he told her everything. A woman had written him. A woman from a town 3 counties west. Her husband had served in the same outfit as him during the war, and she was trying to learn whatever she could about a man who died out there. A brother, maybe a cousin. The woman hadn't been clear which. She was writing to anyone who might have known him. He'd known him, he wrote back. He was careful with it, she said, careful in a way he hadn't been careful with much of anything in years, and she'd noticed that. Then he wrote again, and again. Not many letters, 4 maybe, across one spring. She never read them. She only watched the envelopes leave, and a different hand's writing come back. And she watched her husband sit at that table reading with something on his face she hadn't seen there in a long time, the look of a man thinking about another person. She paused, looked down at her hands. He died in August, she said. Went out to bring in a horse that had gotten loose into the timber. The horse came back without him. We found him the next morning. His heart, the doctor said, he was 41. I sat with that. The coffee had gone still, no more steam rising off it. The room settled into the particular kind of quiet that happens after somebody says something true out loud, and the person listening hasn't decided yet what to do with it. After, she said, I went through his coat. I was looking for his watch. His father had given it to him, and I wanted to save it for our oldest. I found the letters instead. All of them tied together with a piece of twine inside pocket. She still wasn't looking up. I read them. I sat down right there on the bedroom floor and read every one. And they weren't what I'd braced myself for. They weren't that kind of letter at all. They were a woman asking careful questions and a man doing his honest best to answer them. And somewhere in the middle of it, she started asking about him, how he was doing, whether he was sleeping. And he told her things he'd never told me. Not because he was hiding anything from me, because I'd stopped asking a long time before that and she hadn't. She lifted her eyes to mine. I want you to understand this part, she said. I wasn't angry. I sat on that floor and read those letters, and I wasn't angry at her, and I wasn't angry at him either. I was sorry for all 3 of us. I nodded slowly. I understood that. I understood it more than I expected, too. The last letter in the stack was the one that came back to me, she went on. She'd written to him in August after he was already gone. It went first to that town 3 counties east, where he'd been doing seasonal work that summer. By the time it got there, he was already in the ground. The postmaster knew our family, so he forwarded it here. It reached me in September. I opened it because by then there wasn't much point pretending I hadn't already opened the rest. She nodded at the letter still sitting on the table between us. It was from her. She didn't know he'd died. She was writing to tell him her own husband had taken sick over the summer, and she didn't believe he'd see the winter through, and that she'd been thinking of him. And hoped he was well. I looked down at the letter at that careful schoolhouse hand. My wife's hand? She wrote that in August, I said. In August. I put my hand flat on the table beside the letter, didn't touch it. Just spread my fingers and pressed down against the grain of the wood and felt it under my palm, and let out one slow breath that shook a little at the end before it settled. She died in October, I said. I know how the postmaster. He knew us both by then, she said. When your wife's letter came back here that September, I wrote to the town she'd written from. Didn't sign my name, just asked after her because she'd been kind in her letters and I wanted to know she was all right. The postmaster there wrote back, said she'd been ill since spring. Said she hadn't told a soul how bad it was, said she went quickly when she went. I closed my eyes. I'd been out in the barn that October morning. Came in and found her at the kitchen table, head down on her arm, like she'd only meant to sit a minute and gotten tired. The doctor said her heart, the exact same word this woman had used for her own husband, and I hadn't understood it then. Because Mara was 36 and had walked 3 miles the day before to bring soup to a sick neighbor. I hadn't known about the letters. I'd gone through her things afterward and found that tin on the kitchen shelf, envelopes inside addressed in other people's handwriting to other people's names, the neighbor woman's mostly. I'd assumed that was the whole of it. I hadn't thought to look any further. I hadn't imagined there was anything further to find. I opened my eyes. Why did you wait? I asked. 4 years. She was quiet a long moment. I didn't know your name, she said. I knew the town. I knew the return address on that envelope. I didn't know who you were. Then last spring, a man came through here looking for work and mentioned a widower out past the ridge who fixed steps and porch rails for anybody who asked. He said the name of your town. That was a year ago. I waited a year, she said, because I didn't know what I was going to do when you finally came and I didn't want to send for you. I wanted you to come here on your own, for your own reason. Then I'd know. Know what? She looked at me, her face giving away nothing, same as it had on that platform when I'd asked if she had somewhere to go. Know whether you were the kind of man, she said, worth writing for? I want to pause right here for a second. Because if you've never had somebody hand you proof that the person you lost loved you more than you knew, proof, arriving 4 years too late to say thank you for it, you might not understand why. That answer knocked the air clean out of my chest. But I promise you, it's not the last thing that's going to. I didn't answer her right away. Outside, the wind moved through the cottonwoods again, longer this time, bending the tops of the trees for a good while before it let go. I sat with the letter in my hands, felt the paper gone soft at the folds from all that handling, and I didn't need to read it again. I set it back on the table and laid my hand flat beside it, near not touching. I'm not the kind of man who knows what to do with this, I said. I know, she said. I came because your boy fell. I glanced at her, not following. The one who came through here last spring, he mentioned it too. Said you taught some neighbor's boy to set a broken step so it wouldn't happen twice. The lamp had burned down some, and the light in the room had gone lower than when I'd first walked in. Her face in that dimmer light looked exactly the way it had on the platform, level, holding, not asking one thing of me. She wrote about you, the woman said, in the letters. Said you were quiet, didn't waste a word. Said you fixed things without being asked. Said the first winter you two were married, you walked out to the woodshed every morning before light and split the whole day's wood before she was even up, and she pretended not to notice. Because she understood you wanted to give it to her without her thanking you for it. I looked down at my hand on the table. I didn't know she wrote that. She wrote a great deal. I didn't know, I said again. The woman across from me paused, and when she spoke again her voice slowed. She said she was lucky, she said. More than once in more than one letter, I kept them because of how she said it. I didn't say anything. The wind outside had gone still, and the room went with it. Somewhere down the hall, one of the children turned over in a bed, and the rope springs let out one soft note before going quiet again. I'm sorry, I said. For what? That she didn't get to come here, meet you? She got to write the letters, the woman said. She got to imagine it. That's not nothing. I took my hand off the table, set it on my knee, and sat with that a while. The lamp hissed once and steadied. The boy will be all right, I said, meaning the step, meaning the fall, meaning whatever needed fixing that I could actually put my hands on. Yes, the step's fixed. Yes, I should be going in the morning. She looked at me across the table and didn't answer for a long moment, and I understood she wasn't going to argue with me. And I understood, too, that she hadn't really expected me to say anything different. All right, she said. I stood. I left the letter where it was on the table for her to put back in the box or leave out, whichever she chose. At the doorway I stopped with my hand on the frame and didn't turn around. Thank you, I said, for keeping them. Yes, she said. I went out. I didn't sleep. I lay on the cot in the small back room and listened to the house settle around me, the soft tick of cooling wood, the breath of a child down the hall, the long, low quiet of a place that held more than it ever said out loud. Toward morning, I heard her in the kitchen. The stove door, the scrape of a match, kindling catching, the kettle going on the iron, and then nothing for a long while after. Every story like this has a moment where a man either gets on his horse or he doesn't. I want to tell you exactly what mine looked like because it wasn't the moment I expected it to be. I got up before light, folded the blanket, set my bag by the door. When I walked into the kitchen, she had her back to me at the counter and she didn't turn around. 2 cups were out, coffee in both. She hadn't asked me if I wanted any. I sat down at the table. She brought the cups over, set mine in front of me, sat across with hers between both hands. And we drank without talking, the way 2 people drink when they've already said the thing that needed saying, and neither one intends to say it twice. The oldest boy came in barefoot, rubbing one eye, his splinted arm held against his ribs. He stopped in the doorway when he saw my bag by the door. You're going, he said. Yes, he looked at his mother. She didn't look back at him, just kept her eyes on the cup in her hands. Why? The boy asked me. I didn't answer right off. I looked at that boy, 7 years old, barefoot, holding his own splinted arm like it was one more job he'd been handed. And I thought about the morning before, about the loose step, about the woman on the platform with her chin level and her bag at her feet. And I understood there wasn't a single true answer I could give him that a 7-year-old could actually carry. Because the work's done, I said. He thought that over. Nodded slowly, the way a child nods when he's decided to accept a thing he doesn't fully understand yet. Will you come back? I didn't look at her, I looked at him. I don't know, I said. He nodded again and went back down the hall, and we heard the door of the children's room click shut soft behind him. She set her cup down. He'll ask again, she said. I know, I'll tell him you fixed what needed fixing. Yes, she stood, carried both cups to the counter, and didn't bring them back. She stood there with her hands on the edge of it, back to me, and I watched her shoulders, which didn't move at all. Then I stood too, picked up my bag, and went to the door. I stopped there. Didn't open it. Stood with my hand on the latch, bag in the other hand, staring at the floor between my boots, thinking about the ride back across the ridge, the empty house waiting at the end of it. The porch rail I'd built 4 summers ago that nobody sat on anymore. I thought about the candle I'd set out on that rail the first winter after Mara died, and how I hadn't set one out since. I put the bag down. I didn't turn around right away. I stood at the door and listened to her at the counter, a cup settling onto a saucer, a breath drawn that wasn't quite even. I don't know how to do this, I said. I know, I haven't done it in a long time. I know that too. I took my hand off the latch and turned around. She was still at the counter, hadn't moved, hands flat on the wood the same way mine had been flat on that table the night before near the letter, not touching it. The work's not done, I said. She didn't turn. No, she said, it's not. I stood there a moment longer. Then I picked the bag back up, carried it to the small room at the end of the hall, set it inside the door, and walked back to the kitchen. She'd turned around by then, facing me across the room, hands at her sides, chin level the exact same way it had been on that platform. And her eyes didn't give me one single thing more than they had to. I understood she wasn't going to hand me anything else, because she'd already given me everything she had a year ago, in a box on a shelf, waiting for a stranger to earn it. Now it was my turn to do something with it. I crossed the kitchen, stopped in front of her, didn't reach for her. I set my hand on the edge of the counter beside hers, not touching, just near. The way I'd set my hand near that letter the night before. I'll fix the rail on the south side, I said. It's loose at the post. All right. And the door on the smokehouse. All right. She looked down at my hand on the counter beside hers. She didn't move her hand away. She didn't move it closer either. She let it stay right where it was. Down the hall, a door opened. Bare feet on the boards, unhurried, coming toward the kitchen, toward the light. She lifted her hand off the counter and set it over mine. Outside, the sun came up over the cottonwoods, and for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't the only one watching it rise. I still fix that rail every spring, even now, though it's never once come loose again. Some habits you keep because your hands need somewhere honest to go. If you'd been the one standing on that platform, or the one riding past it, would you have crossed the street? Let me know where you're watching this from tonight, because stories like this one have a way of finding people who need to hear them at exactly the right moment. If it found you tonight, stick around, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you would have done in Ezra's boots. I read every single one.